Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Fast Forward Expert Roundtable, Rethinking Your Renewal. My name is Craig Hart, and joining me today for this very special webinar is Jay Wommack. Jay is the CEO and founder of Infinit-I Workforce Solutions. And my name is Craig Hart. For those of you who don't know me, I am part of our event team here at Infinit-I Workforce Solutions as well. And Jay, this is a little bit special for us because you came to me and you said, hey, I have some guys we need to talk to who had done a presentation for you that got you very excited about training that they put together and their headspace and what they're looking at in regards to insurance renewal. I mean, I see you excited, but you were like super excited and had like a pad full of notes that you had taken. And I wanted you to share a little bit of background about our guest speakers that we have today.
Craig, we've been doing this for 21 years. Vertical Lines Group is our parent company, and Infinit-I Workforce is our product. We've been doing this for 21 years, and quite frankly, I've never been more excited about two guests ever in the history of the company. And the reason is insurance is so expensive if you're in the trucking industry. And there's a reason for it, nuclear verdicts, all those types of things. When I got a chance to really sit down with Rick and Tim and talk about what they do, these guys have been on the underwriting side of the table. And I have quite a few dinners with insurance reps, insurance risk managers, agents, and agency owners. But to sit down with them and start talking about what really has impact on insurance, you get pretty much the same answers. When I talk to Rick and Tim, I got different answers. Now, I really go to the next slide real quick because I'm so excited about this one. This is a bell curve. I love bell curves. If anyone's been around me, they know that I look at a bell curve and I see nirvana. So I'm looking at this bell curve, and at the top of the bell curve, within 96, 98%, $18,000 insurance per truck per year. Now, if you think you're outside of that, don't, because that is the norm. Now, when Rick and Tim told me this, I started asking some of the insurance guys I work with, and they would go, yep, that's true. That's what we're looking at. That's what you're looking at when you're running a long haul company. You're looking at about $18,000 per truck per year. Now, like any bell curve, that's not everybody. There are extremes on both sides. We have some companies that are paying up to $37,000. Not our client base, but there are companies out there paying up to $37,000 per year. That's going to run you out of business. And then on the other end of it, you have close to $4,000 on the low end per truck per year. Now, if you're obviously running $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 per month per truck per year insurance cost, then you're in the better percentile. A very small percentile. So these guys have the inside scoop on exactly how to set up your company and your safety program so that you can reduce and negotiate insurance rates. They tell you the language. They've been on the inside track. So I'm probably spending too much time introducing these guys, but I will tell you, this is extremely exciting. Now, one of the things these guys have done is help several underwriting companies create the algorithm. And there are over 800, I'll just call it points of light or 800 bullet points that go into setting up the algorithm. And clearly you can't go analyze all 800 of those, but some they have weighted balances on, and they're going to talk about some of those things that really have a dramatic impact today. I'm really looking forward to it. Now, the second footnote there says Trip. Okay, Trip is a friend of mine. And I asked Trip, I said, Trip, you got trucks. What is your cost per year to insure your truck? And he said, oh, ours is $5,600. He sent me his invoice, and it's the trailers that he's paying that much for. He's paying $13,000 per year per truck for his 13 trucks that he's operating right now. So a lot of times companies don't know what they're really paying until they break down their insurance cost. So this one line item can be the difference between a successful OR and a failure is an OR. So with that in mind, these guys can help you streamline, operate, and you can turn your safety department into a profit center. So before we go to these guys, real quick, I want to do two quick ads. Number one, at the end of this, we're going to offer you a free trial for our system. If you haven't ever used our system, there's a free trial, 30 days, and you'll know how to sign up for it at the end of this. The second thing is, what really intrigued me about Rick and Tim, they've created a 40-hour class for safety directors to turn a safety director into a profit center, to turn a safety director into someone that really is a line item that an operator and an owner could be proud of, that a CEO could be proud of. So that's all the flagrant ads I'm going to say today. At the end of the show, you'll be able to see how to get more information on those things. But with that, let's go to Rick and Tim, because these guys are geniuses and I'm really excited about it.
Excellent. And one thing for our audience attending at home, this event thrives on your feedback. So the easiest way to participate with our guest speakers, if you have questions, is through the chat function. To open up your chat window, click on the More button on your menu, and the very first thing you'll see on there is chat. So go ahead and fire up your chat buttons while we get ready to move on to the next slide. And to let us know that you're there and listening, let us know who you are. Let us know who you're with, what company, and what part of the country that you're in. And you can also be international as well. Our guests today are from Canada. We may have some folks on the call today with us from Canada or Mexico. All right, now without further ado, our guests today are Tim Lucko and Rick Geller with GL Transport Consulting. Between these two gentlemen, they have over 60 combined years of safety and risk management experience with the transportation sector. And their focus is on identifying the right problem and providing the right solutions. So Tim, Rick, we're very excited to have you here with us today. What can you tell us a little bit about yourselves real quick?
Okay, good morning. Thank you for having us today. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Craig, for providing us the opportunity to speak with everybody today. Those attending, we really appreciate you making the time today. We know everybody's busy, especially if you're in a safety manager role. You're busy 7 days a week. As it was said, I've got over 35 years in managing risk and loss prevention. And the last 20 years have been focusing with a variety of different types of fleets. To give myself a better understanding, I've had a commercial driver's license for 37 years. I've run decks, containers, reefer, aggregate using tandem dump and things of that nature. So I have understanding from the compliance perspective and from the driver's seat as well. And as far as GL Transport Consulting, Rick and I have been working together for about 2 years. Rick?
Yes, good morning. And again, thanks. Thank you, Jay and Craig, and to all the people that are joining us this morning and taking time from your busy schedules. This is about year 40 for myself in the insurance or in insuring the trucking industry. And I've done from claims to underwriting to loss control. I've spent about the last 30 years in the fleet loss control end of the business. Before that, I was safety manager for a couple of large fleets in Western Canada. And as Tim said, we've been providing quality service to the trucking industry now since 2020.
Excellent. Now, I know part of what you all do is you do have that 40-hour safety management program that Jay mentioned earlier. Kind of wanted to give people a quick overview of what that program entails, and we'll talk more about it at the end of the event as well if people want to take advantage of it. But I guess, Rick, could you give us just kind of a quick overview of what this safety management program is designed to do, and then we're going to talk more about controlling risk and loss control assessment.
I'll take this one, Craig.
Okay, sure, Tim.
Everybody's aware that there's an abundance of training available for safety managers, but very little that goes beyond compliance. What we want you guys to do to consider new concepts in safety management. We'd like you to keep an open mind about what we're speaking about today, because some of the concepts that we're going to be discussing are different than you've probably seen before. We're going to talk about how you're inundated with data. Some of the data is relevant. Some of it is just noise. Our program is going to show you how to determine what is germane and to differentiate that from the noise. We're also going to help you identify what is the right problem to solve. Is it a driver problem? Is it a company problem? Is it an industry problem? Every company that I've ever worked with or been with has developed action plans or change management initiatives And it's well known in the change management worlds that about 70% of these initiatives aren't very successful. We're going to help you show how to make your successful change management and your action plans effective. We're going to help you learn about the different concepts of continuous improvement. We'll show you how to achieve the continuous risk improvement results that you want, the design, the analysis, the action plans, and how to review. Also, we're all in the data with technology right now. We'll show you how to manage what will happen tomorrow with your technologies, not what happened yesterday. Next slide.
Excellent. All right, gang. Well, let's hit today's meat and potatoes. Loss control assessment. I love this quote. This is a Rick Geller original. You know how you always been. Don't be like that. So.
Well, I may have put voice to it, Craig, but this is actually it's actually more germane than that. This is one thing that the insurance industry and that the courts this is the message that they're trying to get across to the trucking industry, is that there's changes required. And, you know, as far as your insurance program goes, you know, I mean, your touch point, other than your broker, your touch point with your insurance company is usually that loss control visit. And don't underestimate the importance of that loss control visit, both from the perspective of it provides an opportunity for you to showcase your commitment to safety by detailing, you know, what you've done and, you know, what the result has been, and outlining what your plan is, you know, going forward. But, you know, over and above that, it's also your opportunity to bring your insurance company onto your team. And that's, you know, most of the insurance and especially the loss control people bring a wealth of knowledge regarding trucking industry. And they bring it from a different perspective because, you know, you see what happens at your company, and, you know, maybe you've got a half a dozen peers or friends or that you talk with, or a network that you talk with. But these guys visit a couple of hundred fleets a year. So they get a much broader picture of what's happening in the industry and what's trending in the industry. And this is your opportunity to harness that and make them part of the team. So, you know, ask them, you know, to let them know what your plans are, and ask them, you know, how they can help you. What can they bring to the table to help you? You know, and lastly, you know, use that loss control visit to manage expectations. Okay. You know, they're going to provide you with a letter, you know, a week or two after the visit. They're going to provide you with a recommendation letter, and it's going to outline the things that, you know, the opportunities for improvement or the things they would like to see. So use this opportunity to manage the expectations. Ask your loss control person a year from now, what will you see that tells you that we're doing a good job on managing safety at this company? And you know, and by asking that question, you know, you get an opportunity to understand what's important to the loss control people, what's important to the insurance people. And why, you know, why should you think, or why should you consider that this is important? Next slide, please, Craig. As Jay said before, there's a wild swing. You know, everybody starts out paying, you know, $1 for $1 worth of insurance, but you know, underwriters can apply credits that reduce your cost. They can also apply surcharges that increase your costs, or they always have the option of just declining the quote, period, and then you've got no insurance from them. But bear in mind that, you know, the job you do on on managing your safety program goes a long ways in where you fit in that continuum and where you get slotted. The insurance industry, they don't expect perfection. They know things, the best laid plans of mice and men, things can go sideways. But what they are looking at is they're gonna get a read on the culture of your company. They're gonna look at your past performance. They're gonna get a read on the sincerity of effort that you're putting out, and probably, most importantly, to them is this a company that we can work with?
Rick, you mentioned something that really intrigued me when we first started having these conversations. The insurance industry pretty much starts at $1, and they can either add up to $1.30 or more, or not insure you, or deduct down to 70 cents. That's an incredible range. And so I'm looking at your last bullet point here. How do you position your company to get that lower range? That is a critical question right now. And one of the things that you pointed out, and I may be jumping the gun on the slides here, but I get too excited about what we're talking about. If I'm writing the checks to insurance companies and I'm with a trucking company, what you just said, so we've seen the bell curve, and now we've seen the dollar up to $1.30 down to 70 cents. That is a huge range. One thing you mentioned in those 800 points of light, or I call it 800 points of light, it's kind of a throwback to the old George Bush regime down here in the States. You said that if they have a continuation plan, that weighs very heavily on safety. I thought that was intriguing. I'd never heard that from anyone else before, a continuation plan. So can you, if I'm jumping the gun, Craig, pardon me, but talk to us about that for a little bit.
Sure.
Well, you are jumping the gun, but I guess it won't hurt if people hear it twice. Really, when it comes to the continuation of the safety plan, what Jay is referring to is whether or not, or what's the likelihood of that safety program surviving the departure of the safety manager. That's really what we're talking about. How embedded is it into the fabric of the company? But we are going to get to that in a few minutes. Craig, if we could just go back one slide, please. So, when it comes to dealing with the insurance company, there's a couple of critical factors that you have to keep in mind. First of all, you gotta know your numbers. Underwriters are numbers people. The insurance industry lives and dies by numbers. So remember, we said, we talked about, the sincerity of your effort in managing safety at your company. When I go to a carrier, why do I have to tell them what their per million mile accident rate is? Or why do I have to tell them the kinds of crashes that they're having? Why are they waiting for the insurance company to tell you what your ISS score is for your SMS profile? What kinds of violations you're having and what your violation rates are, whether your basics are in alert or not. Shouldn't you be telling the insurance company where you're at and what you're doing about it? Even simple things like management reports. When I ask about how frequently do you provide the executive of the company with a status report for where we're at? All of those kinds of things, those collisions, the violations, the inspections, the insurer wants to see that you're trending them and that you're examining them for training opportunities and ways to reduce them. And one very, very simple thing that is, or two very, very simple things that are 100% within your control is, to report the claims and report them timely, because a delay in reporting drives that claims cost up. And there's really no excuse for delaying that report. Next
Right.
slide.
So knowing the numbers, basically we need trucking companies to be able to tell their own story. They need to know where they're at, and they need to show that they are responding to those numbers in the appropriate way. So.
Yeah, have a plan. What's in place to prevent, what's in place to detect, what's in place to manage. And we'll talk more about that.
Okay, now I'm going to speak a little bit more about the safety succession planning. When I used to conduct loss prevention visits with carriers, one of the first things I'd always ask the safety manager or safety director is that if you won the lottery tomorrow, who's taking over for you? Are you mentoring somebody? Are you coaching somebody? Or are you it? And what's the company's plan if you weren't going to be there? So we would want to know if that safety program would survive them leaving. How well is the program documented? How well is it understood by everybody in the company? Is there evidence of communication of it, right? Not just people signing off that they're acknowledging they received a document or a manual, but they actually understand it. And does there appear to be buy-in within the company for the safety program? A good gauge is to see when the safety manager goes on holidays for a couple of weeks, are there significant challenges when they leave? Might be less buy-in than you think, but if there's buy-in in the safety program, things are going to run rather smooth. There's going to be a couple of hiccups because some of the critical decisions might not be as aware for some of the people, but it should run okay when they're not there. One of the things you also get reviewed is your shop, is the safety shop considered an obstacle to doing business? Is it considered a necessary evil for compliance and insurance purposes? Or is it part of your culture? Right? There's a big difference between it being a priority and being a part of your culture. If safety is a priority, well, then priorities change. Right? If we have 10 unseated trucks on the side of the fence right now, geez, the priority is to get those drivers in the seat, so maybe we'll change our standards. But if it's part of your culture, it's part of your decision-making process, it's part of the way you do business. He also gauges how well is the safety manager's relationships with the other managers, the operations manager, the maintenance manager. Do those managers have an understanding of the safety program as well and their responsibilities? Or when the question comes up, do they automatically, well, just go talk to the safety manager. He knows what you're supposed to do, right? Do they have an understanding of what you're supposed to do? This is one of the ways that the loss prevention auditor from the insurance company is going to engage how they're going to gauge how well your program is embedded into the company. I know they do this because I did it all the time. I wanted to know you had a culture of safety and safety wasn't a priority. And training, when you conduct training in your office, how do you determine how much of the training has been learned and how much is adopted into the driver's daily job? Or is it simply a checkbox training program? Do you circle back to see if the training's been effective, right? Are you getting the results that you want from the training, right? So those are the things that you want to consider when you're talking about succession planning for safety managers and your training program. Rick, next. Or Craig, my mistake.
Yeah. It's okay. Rick and I get mistaken for each other all the time.
Yeah, we look alike.
Absolutely. Yeah, more than you realize. When we're talking about the loss control assessment and where does the fault really lie, it is probably the most common thing that you're going to see is that all hiccups and all problems in a trucking company are somehow or some way going to land up in a driver's lap. No matter where they originated, but this is what the most common approach seems to be sometimes. Our approach to finding out where the problem really is called the groundwater approach. And let me give you an analogy. If I go to a lake tomorrow morning and I see one dead fish floating, I'm going to consider it a fish problem. And if I go back the next day to that same lake and I see half of the fish in that lake are dead, I'm going to start considering it's a lake problem, not just a fish problem. There's something wrong with that lake. And then the following day I go back and I see half the fish dead in that lake, and I look around me and I see a few other lakes and half the fish are dead in those lakes as well. That's probably an environmental problem beyond the lake. So the analogy that we draw is the one dead fish it's a driver problem, right? It's not the entire company. It's one driver that needs some behavior improvements. And if half the fish are dead, that's a company problem. If half the drivers are having challenges with performance or behavior, you have to start looking at your systems and processes. And if you go and you see half the fish in your lake and the other lakes are dead, then that's probably an industry-wide issue. You might be able to manage it, or you just have to monitor it and deal with it as an industry with the regulators or things of that nature. So with that, we're going to show you how to identify the right problem, which one it is, and how to solve the right problem the first time. Because you don't take the solution for the one dead fish and apply it to half the fish in the lake, because the solutions are different for each problem that you face. One of the things that as a safety manager, you also have to understand that you might have to own some of the responsibility for the programming that cause unintended consequences for driver behavior or performance that is not desired within the company. You're going to have to look at your policies, you're going to have to look at your processes, and you're going to have to look at your procedures to see if they're getting your intended results, right? Are the drivers following your procedures, but the results aren't what you want? So those are things that you have to examine. Is it a driver problem? Is it a company problem? Or is it an industry problem? Because the solutions for each are different. Next.
Okay, now we get a chance to have a look and see how groundwater really does apply. And thank you, Craig, for the research that you did for us here. But we've just posted the three examples of nuclear verdicts, and the first one is probably one pretty widely known, Werner's $90 million judgment. And that one generated a lot of outrage at the time. The driver was driving down the highway, the third party lost control, crossed the center divider and hit the Werner truck. And there was a lot of outrage at the time as, what's the poor driver supposed to do? What was he doing wrong? And when you look at it through that narrow view and that narrow lens of just the driver's actions behind the wheel, I can understand. But let's apply groundwater and let's look at these judgments and how the courts assessed liability. Because in that Werner judgment, the courts kind of agreed with you. Only 14% of the judgment was assessed against the Werner driver. There was 16% against the third party driver. 70% of the liability was assessed against Werner employees other than the driver. Okay, and the next one in Galindo, 40% against the driver, 60% against employees of the company other than the driver. And in the last one, 1% against the driver, 99% of the liability was assessed against employees other than the driver. Folks, we have a lake problem, not a fish problem.
Rick, let me interrupt real quick, Rick, because I want to make sure that people listening to this realize, because we've had over 1 million interactions with drivers and company employees through our system, and we've had over 25 million classes we delivered. And it is very, 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 very rare to ever hear a company think that it is anyone but the driver's fault. These nuclear verdicts are going against the companies. Now this is what keeps a lot of the owners up at night. But understand, you've got to be training everybody in the company. So the big takeaway is culture. So far, the big takeaway for me is your culture, know your numbers, know what's happening at your company. Let the insurance companies want to write policies. That's how they make their living. Help them know the numbers. You're not playing chess against them. You're going to row the boat with them in the same direction. So understand that everybody behind the walls, including the drivers, you've got to be safety aware, create that culture of safety. Is that my takeaway, Rick? Am I looking at it the right way?
Yep. And as I said, I mean, clearly, we have a lake problem and people are focusing on the fish. And I think it's important. I think it's important that people understand how trucking companies incur negligence, because there are essentially 5 ways that a trucking company can incur negligence. The first is the obvious one, the driver's actions behind the wheel. But the other 4 relate to the company's actions, not the driver. So you've got, negligent employment, which is, the selection process. And how many companies, insist that, the driver or, the driver have 2 or 3 or 5 years of previous experience, and make the assumption that because they're coming with 3 years of experience, well, somebody somewhere else has taught them, and that they're coming with the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need them to have. The third one is negligent supervision, and that's primarily, used to be primarily an hours of service issue, but more recently, what I've seen is a training issue where you've got new or drivers that have skill gaps, and you put them with a coach or a mentor or a driver trainer over the road, and then try and run them full team. So how much training are they actually receiving when the new guy is driving and the seasoned driver is asleep in a bunk? And then there's negligent entrustment. And negligent entrustment, really the crux of that is the plaintiff attorney is going to show that the driver either is incompetent or has displayed some kind of incompetence in the past, and it doesn't have to be a lot. A speeding ticket 5 years ago is enough, and the company knew or ought to have known that that this driver was a hazard to the public. And very often where carriers get caught is they have hiring criteria that specifies a maximum number of violations or a maximum number of demerits, but there's no annual requalification, so your existing drivers may not meet your selection criteria. And when a plaintiff attorney sees that, he's going to give you a kiss on the forehead. You just handed him a gift, because he looks at you and says, look, you wouldn't hire this driver, and tell the court again why you wouldn't hire him, because you don't consider him to be a safe driver, but yet you hand him a load assignment every day. And bear in mind too, one last thing to keep in mind here is that the expectation is being upped. It's not trending downward, it's being upped. Most carriers have some sort of telematics system in place. They get exception reports. But one of the gaps in the safety management program is that real-time data creates real-time liability. So if you get exception reports that tells you that your driver was speeding, had some hard lateral moves and some hard braking incidents, the expectation is, you don't talk to him next time he's back in the terminal. The expectation is that you're going to address the issue right at the time. And most of the progressive discipline policies that are in place were never ever designed to handle that kind of issue. Next slide, please, Craig.
That's a huge point right there. Everyone, Colin in the chat window shared a worksheet that we put together for all of you so that you can kind of take a reflective view on your own organization in terms of where you're at, in terms of premium and the scale and so forth. But I would write down real-time data creates real-time liability. I know all of you are juggling different technology systems, your cameras, your ELDs. These are all creating data points that you have to respond to. Because at this point, now that you have this equipment in place, the expectation is that you're looking at it and responding to it. So real-time data creates real-time liability. That is huge. I could not have written that better myself. Rick, you're a genius.
Well, yesterday I couldn't spell it, so today I are one.
Okay, now we're talking about, I'm going to speak to the first part of the slide. When you look at your carrier profile and you're analyzing it and you've seen that, oh, this month I've got too many hours of service violations, and a month before that the guys weren't doing a good job on trip inspections, and the next month is going to be something else. that is safety management by flavor of the month. It is being reactionary, not proactive. And when I've talked to carriers that I see that, I sort of use that fishbowl analysis, right? Where you have a goldfish in a fishbowl and one side of the bowl is a castle, and every 30 seconds the fish swims back and forth. And every time he sees the castle, he goes, oh, a castle. It's like it's new every time they see it. And it's sort of that management of flavor of the month. And drivers slowly understand that. You're not solving the problem, but by managing it month by month. And drivers, like I said, are more than aware of that. They know they have to get through 30 days. They don't have to put a lot of effort, maybe not even much thought, because they know next month they're going to be onto something else, right? And I remember one time when I was driving for a debt company, and a couple of the drivers, I guess, were damaging tarps and things of that nature, and an edict came down, a memorandum came down that all drivers have to make sure they're tarping better, and we want to make sure you have enough bungees, and probably 95, 99% of us were doing it properly. So a whole bunch of us just went to the maintenance area, got another box of bungees, put them in the bunk, and showed that we're being proactive, and the company thought we were stellar employees. Look, the memo came down, and all of a sudden, obviously things are going to get better because they have more bungees now. Well, we weren't doing it wrong in the first place. All the company did was cause us to take some time to go get them, and it cost them more money for bungees that were just sitting in the bunk. They weren't solving the real problem. They should have addressed tarping and strapping procedures with a couple of drivers that were the problem. And that's sort of managing flavor of the month. You want to have a proactive approach to safety management, not reactive. You want to manage what's going to happen in the future, not what happened before. Rick?
Yeah, so, let's talk about numbers. Remember, underwriters are numbers people. So, but before we do that, let's talk for a second about reactive versus proactive, because, becoming proactive in safety management is kind of like become the holy grail. So what do we mean? Exactly what is reactive and what is proactive, and how do we achieve that? So, the easiest way I think that to think about it is this. When you're monitoring outcomes, when you're monitoring outputs, that's on the reactive side. And as Tim just said, we see a lot of that in the industry where, we get the carrier profile and we see this month, hours of service popped up. So we respond to it. Or we count crashes, we count widgets, whatever. But we count something and then we respond to it, okay? The proactive side is when we start managing the inputs. So let me give an example of what I mean by that. Let's assume that the goal here, the desired outcome, is a clean inspection. From a managing the inputs perspective, what are the things that you need the driver to do? What are the things that you need operations to do? What are the things that you need maintenance to do? So that if everybody does what they're supposed to do, we get the outcome we're looking for. Okay? And that's the difference between reactive and proactive. Okay? When we're focusing on the numbers, be very, very cautious. When you're trying to, your numbers are never more dangerous than when you're trying to use them to control behavior. Use the numbers rather than trying to catch and apprehend bad guys, and rather than trying to control, use those numbers to understand what's happening in your fleet. Okay, and then apply the groundwater approach to it. Is it a fish problem? Is it a lake problem? Or is it an environmental problem? Driver, company, industry. Okay, but you can't begin to do that until you gather those numbers and you look at them not to try and nail somebody, not to try and apprehend somebody, but to try and understand what's happening in your fleet. When you put the focus on individuals, whether it's drivers or dispatchers or the lady that waters the plants, now you lose sight of that larger picture of what you're what's happening inside your fleet, and you lose sight of that bigger picture, and it's almost guaranteed that you will be you will not be solving the right problem. Last thing on the reactive proactive side is transactional audits versus process audits. So let me give you an example of what we're talking about. Let's use driver hiring as an example. So there are 10 steps in the driver hiring process at ABC company. So we take a random number of files and we audit those files, and we see how many people are following those 10 steps. And that will tell us whether or not people are following the process. What it won't tell us is whether we've got the right process in place or not. So Yogi Berra said it best: we're lost, but we're making good time. Okay. On the process audit side, start with the goal. Okay. The desired outcome of your hiring process ought to be a good driver. And however you want to define that for your company, the process, should deliver a good hire. So now instead of just ticking a box on how many times did they follow this step, ask yourself, how many times did that process deliver a good hire? And in those cases where it didn't, and remember, you're defining what a good hire is for your company. So in instances where it didn't, this is where process audits really shine, is where you have processes that cross functional lines. So like driver hiring, because you're going to have HR involved, have maintenance involved, you could have operations involved, you're certainly going to have safety involved, okay? And everybody has, their piece of the pie as to what they're supposed to do. But people are people, and when they don't see and when they don't understand what that desired outcome is, they take shortcuts. They develop little workarounds to make their life easier, and they don't understand the impact it has downstream. Okay? Process audits will help you figure out what the right problem is to solve. Okay? Next slide, please.
Hey, now our training program gives you a 90-day continuous improvement cycle. It's an organized approach to safety management. It allows you to set your goals and objectives on what you want to accomplish in that, right? You're going to implement your action plans, and then you're likely going to review your results and determine if you're getting the results that you wanted, right? At the beginning of the 90-day cycle, you set your goal and objective. What result do I want to see at the end? At the end of the 90 days, you analyze and determine, am I getting the results I wanted with the action plan I implemented? If you didn't get it at the end of the 90 days, then what you do is you review and revise and determine where you can improve upon the plan and institute the 90-day improvement cycle again. And then you continually to do that, and it's a continuous process to continue to improve your safety program. Now, when you get to that end of that 90-day cycle and you determine that you've met your goal and objective, you don't stop there. What you want to use this as a continuous improvement opportunity. You start upping the bar, right? If you set a benchmark for a violation rate that was acceptable, now your next improvement cycle reduces that violation rate, right? So you continue to up the bar. You continuously try to improve on your performance in the fleet. Next.
Okay, carrying on with the continuous risk improvement, when we're talking about what's in place to address, inappropriate behavior and how do you evaluate it and how do you respond to it and those kinds of things, what we're really talking about is compliance and governance. So let's just take a second and let's differentiate the two, because oftentimes we find an inordinate focus on compliance at the expense of fleet governance. So compliance requirements generally come, from outside the organization, whether it's, the regulators or a financial institute, your insurance company, or whoever. It could be a customer, a contract requirement. But those compliance requirements come from outside the company. And the fleet governance procedures and that, those are what's generated from inside the company. That's the culture of your company, how you've decided that you want to do business. And that's, like I said, very often we find that carriers are focused on compliance, but not so focused on governance. And essentially, I mean, internal governance is all about really three things. What's in place to prevent misbehavior? That's your training programs and your professional development programs and that sort of thing. What's in place to detect misbehavior when it occurs? Now we're talking about your processes, your policies, your supervision of staff, your self-audit processes, those kinds of things. And then how is it managed? People, the expectation is that it be managed fairly and consistently. So, we don't give somebody a get out of jail free card because they're a top producer. Everybody is treated the same. I mean, that how is it managed? One of the questions I ask is, okay, you have, how many people were disciplined for hours of service last year? And carriers, after digging, will produce a number. And then I ask them how many actually committed an hours of service violation. So, if you disciplined, or if there was some kind of management intervention for 5 drivers last year for hours of service offenses, and there were only 5 that were committed throughout the company, that tells me one thing about the culture of your company. If there were 5 drivers disciplined, but I find out there were 200 violations, how come the other 195, why did they get a pass? Okay, that's the kind of thing that they think. The other thing that I think we have to understand about compliance and why some of the compliance programs fail is compliance policies. They're an important, or they fulfill an important function. But when you try and jam compliance policies into a legal framework, you really restrict the ability of that compliance policy to be effective for you. And what do I mean by that? You all have binders and binders with policies and procedures, and everybody has a first page in there that says, I have read and understood. And the driver signs it, and we put that piece of paper into a qual file. So, from the perspective of jamming that compliance policy into a legal framework, if the driver then violates a policy, it may give you cause to, the legal standing to terminate the driver if that's what you want to do. Okay, but what it doesn't do, when you jam it into that legal framework, it doesn't tell you that, there's no way to demonstrate that the employee converted whatever knowledge you were imparting to them, or whatever compliance policy you wanted them to follow, it doesn't demonstrate that they actually adopted that into their daily work habits. Okay. And I mean, a real simple thing. Hey, every one of you has a cell phone out there, and you all had a compliance policy or a user agreement that you had to sign. How many of you read it? Or how many of you just signed it because I need to get the phone? Okay. The last thing I'd like to say about, the compliance and governance, if you haven't got a copy of the Yates memo, and if you haven't got a copy of the 2019 update from the U.S. Department of Justice on the evaluation of corporate compliance programs, if you haven't got them, send a note through the chat, and I'll make them available to Jay and Craig, and I'm sure they'd be pleased to pass them along to you.
Actually, we can go ahead and put links to those on the follow-up email that we'll send everyone that's attending with us today. Well, that'll probably be the easiest way to make sure everybody gets a hold of it.
Okay, well, I'll supply them to you. Next slide, please.
Sure. And I just want to highlight that last bullet here, the prevent, detect, manage, report. This is a real easy barometer to put your own safety management program that you have today. Compare what it's doing, what it needs to be doing versus what it's doing in each one of these buckets here. So prevention, detection, management, and reporting of bad behavior. You guys should be able to very quickly eyeball your own organizations against just those four to see if you're lacking.
Well, that's an excellent point, Craig. And again, carriers, I mentioned, they have binders and binders of policies, but how many actually test those policies and procedures to see if they work?
Okay. Now, training comparison costs. As Rick alluded to earlier with the nuclear verdicts and the high price the court decisions that are coming out, and it identifies that the driver's fault is probably 25 to 30% for responsibility for the liability. I would suspect that the majority of a carrier's training dollars are allocated to driver training. And taking that into consideration, about 25 to 30% at most of the liability that a carrier can incur are from the driver. 70% or more of the liability exposure that you have as a carrier comes from the operational areas. And from my experiences, when I have done loss control visits with carriers, little to no money is allocated for the training of dispatchers, for the training of safety managers, for the training of driver trainers, right? Driver trainers are, geez, he has no violations, he's a great driver, he has no crashes, so therefore he must be a great driver trainer. No, there's a lot of soft skills and things of that nature that would go along with that as well. So it appears from the way that the liabilities occur that there's a misalignment with the training dollars. That you should start spending more money on training safety managers, on educating dispatchers, on educating your coaches and mentors who are your driver trainers or things of that nature. Are people also measured on their responsibilities, right? Are there evaluations for everybody in the company to see if they're doing what they're doing, should be doing? Are your recruiters measured for how often they get a good hire? Or are they measured for how long, are they measured for how many people they hire? Are they measured for how long a driver stays? Do they stay 6 months? Do they stay over 24 months, right? Reducing your training costs. Or is the basic objective to fill a seat because there's unseated trucks at the fence, right? Is your maintenance area measured for how often that they fix it right the first time, right? Do you need training in your maintenance areas? Those things. Your driver trainers and coaches, taking into consideration that the drivers that they're training, how well do the drivers perform? How long do those drivers stay? So when you're comparing your training costs and allocating training dollars, there seems to be a bit of a misalignment when you compare it to liability. And to have people understand better what they should be doing in their roles behind the desk would definitely be an advantage when you're going into a core process. Next.
So to sum up for you there, Tim, for those on the call, if you're wondering, do I need to be training everybody in my company but drivers? The answer is yes, it would benefit you. And this is these are underwriters, experienced underwriters saying, yes, this is what you need to be doing. All right,
Telematics.
we're running a little bit long here today. So I know, Tim, we've got to talk about ROI. We've got to talk about telematics and go through these here because we do want some questions to be asked from our audience. So if you all have questions for Rick and Tim on what they've covered thus far, go ahead and fire those off in chat. We'll keep track of those and we'll have a couple minutes at the end to ask them both those questions so you can get some answers.
Okay, let me sum up telematics with one word: purpose. And it's not easy to determine, but before you invest in telematics, before you develop the program, ask yourself, what's the purpose? Okay. You know, a lot of people are using telematics to try and identify, poor behavior, that sort of thing. Telematics are the Fitbit of the trucking industry. So, when you bought that Fitbit, did you buy it just for the purpose of counting steps? Or did you have something else in mind? Did you have a larger goal in mind? Because the problem is, when we're faced with a difficult question, I mean, if I want to nail down something simple, if I want to count triangles, I tell a computer, if it's got 3 sides, it's a triangle, count it. Simple. When my goal is improving safety or reducing crashes, not so simple. So because that's a difficult question, let's swap it out. Let's put an easier one in there. How many hard braking, how many speeding offenses, all of those kinds of things. Anybody remember Eaton's VORAD system from about 15 years ago? It tracked one thing, it tracked following distance. When's the last time you heard following distance being used in this mix? So, part of flavor of the month kind of thing, but also, go in there, figure out what the purpose is, what you're trying to achieve, and then what is germane to count. Okay. Lastly, if I use this, do I get a discount? The short answer is, merely installing them? No. You have to show you're using them effectively to manage the fleet. And again, we come back to what do the numbers say, because underwriters are numbers people. Okay, next, please. So, we often get asked, well, safety costs money and all those kinds of things. And safety managers say, platitudes like it pays, it's the right thing to do, and all those kinds of things. And nobody will argue with you, but you won't get a lot of traction out of it either. So let's put some numbers there that people can understand. With a 3% profit margin for every $5,000 deductible you pay, the company has to generate $170,000 to $175,000 in sales to pay for those losses. Now, all things being equal, okay, with a lack of any kind of meaningful intervention, history repeats itself. So your losses are probably going to be fairly stable over time. So let's assume that we know what the losses are going to look like for this year. We know what the annual revenue of the company looks like. Let's apply the tax-free day concept. Okay, everybody familiar with that? Where, if I devoted 100% of my income starting January 1st, sometime in June, I would have paid up all the taxes that I owe, and I get to keep the rest. Okay, so let's apply that to your company. We know what the losses are going to look like. We know from a 3%, or use whatever profit margin you want, and calculate how much revenue you're going to have to generate just to cover those losses. Now, I know that trucking companies don't earn their revenue equally one day at a time, but humor me. Let's just pretend for this exercise that they do. Okay, take that that number that of what you need to generate, or the revenue you need to generate to pay for the losses. And you know what your annual revenue is. You can calculate it on a daily basis, do the arithmetic. And folks, let me assure you that if you go to your boss and tell them circle May 25th on the calendar, because up to and including that day, this company doesn't have a prayer of making a penny. Every nickel that's generated is going to go for paying losses. I promise you, you'll have his undivided attention. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay. How to expand your recruiting pool. One of the things that in our training program that we advocate is experience is not a proxy for competence. Having done something for a long period of time doesn't mean that you actually get very good at it. Our safety certification program will show you how to hire for knowledge, for skills, and for abilities. The foundational piece of that is a job description. Know what you want in a driver. How do you currently hire drivers without a job description? How do you recruit, right? What do you put into your recruitment advertisements? How do you know what a driver needs to do for you if you don't have a job description? Their knowledge, their skills, and abilities. And when you bring them on to interview and to screen them, how do you test for this, right? What we advocate is you develop a skill gap analysis. You indicate what you want them to be able to do for your company, and then you evaluate that against what they're bringing to the table. What skills, knowledge, and abilities do they have? And if there are gaps, you create a development plan and you train to educate them for those gaps. It could be simply that you're getting a highway driver that is applying for a city job, and he just might need some coaching and mentoring for backing because he hasn't done it very much lately. Those types of things. You identify the gaps and then you train for it. The driver pool is too small now to preclude people from it that don't have 100% of the knowledge, skills, and abilities. But you need to have a plan in place to identify the gaps that they might have in knowledge or skills, and then to develop for them. You also want to consider, it's called career pathing. You hire on drivers that have been with you for a while. They're going to want an opportunity for some type of advancement in the company. It might simply be a new piece of equipment, going to long combination vehicles, for example, or maybe hauling different commodities if they've been doing the same thing for a long time. Or if they enjoy what they're doing and they're very good at it, they might want to be trainers, or they might want to be coaches or mentors for younger drivers coming into the company. But providing these drivers an opportunity for career advancement is going to allow you to keep them longer, because if they actually want to improve and they want to advance, they might look at somewhere else if they can't get it in their own company. Next slide.
All right, so I am sure that there are some of you on this call that have additional questions that are specific to your own organizations that you would love to run by Tim and Rick to get some guidance on. It's also a great time right now to ask any questions in chat that you have for these two folks. We all get to deal with insurance on a regular basis, some of us more than others. These are folks that have been behind that trench. They know the thinking that goes into the decisions that are being made that are impacting your trucking companies. So it's very rare that you get to pin one, much less two of them down at this time. So go ahead and fire off your questions in chat. And while you're doing that, Jay, did you want to hit the trial program?
Yeah, we because you participated today on the webinar, we have a free trial, 30-day free trial if you're not one of our clients, and just take advantage of that. Craig, how can they get in touch with us to do the free?
Actually, we just launched some poll questions on the screen right now. The first one is, if you would like information about our complimentary trial of the Infinit-I Workforce Solutions System. So for all those opportunities that you heard Rick and Tim talking about training, that's what we do. Safety training, custom training, you name it, that's our lives. Also, if you would like information from Rick and Tim about the services they provide and their safety manager training program, that 40-hour course where they can turn your organization's safety management group into a profit center and to make you a more effective organization. Go ahead and click yes or no. And then one other thing that we are offering for all of our attendees today, because we're a big fan of having multiple weapons at your disposal to solve your problems, is bettertruckdrivingjobs.com. We are offering a free year of job postings on bettertruckdrivingjobs.com for all of our attendees today, so that you can take advantage of that as an additional tool to attract those folks that Tim was talking about, those folks that may have not quite the 100% of what you think you need, but have skills that are valuable to your organization, and you can do that additional training to make them the best employee that you need them to be. So feel free to respond to those, and then we'll do follow-ups after the event is over today, and get you that information. Excellent. Well, Rick, Tim, while folks are answering those questions, thank you so much for being with us today. Everybody stayed till the end with us today, so you were hitting them with some great knowledge. You were hitting them with a ton of information. I was taking notes for myself about different takeaways on the different 5 types of negligence. I mean, comparing your programs that you all have out there right now, your safety management programs that you're running with your respective companies against the things that Rick shared today. Where are those gaps? Where are those things that you may be doing great on driver negligence, but you may be dropping the ball in negligent hiring or negligent retention of your staff? These are all areas for improvement. But then also, once you are improving them, communicating those wins to your insurer is huge. I mean, you gotta be honest, obviously, but there's nothing that's preventing you from cheerleading on your own behalf. Am I right, Rick? You guys want to hear the good news that people are doing when they're doing the right thing.
Well, and I mean, first of all, Craig, our pleasure to provide the presentation today, and my sincere hope that if people could take one thing away that would help them manage safety at there, then we've accomplished what we set out to accomplish.
Excellent. And Tim, do you have any last thoughts for us today?
No, I sort of echo what Rick sort of said, that anytime I've attended something like this, if I've got 1 or 2 nuggets that I can take back to the workplace, if it created like that aha moment for me where it causes me to reevaluate the way I'm doing something or a new way of doing something, it's always had value for me.
Excellent. Now, Jay, I know you've been writing notes. I've been hearing your paper rustling while we've been going through this event. So.
I have written notes, Craig, and I appreciate it, but we're running long, and I just want to make sure everybody understands we appreciate them being here. I appreciate Rick and Tim and you, Craig, and all the attendees. I did notice that we had several insurance people that were making comments in the chat section, and the gist of their comments was really good information. So Rick and Tim, y'all are on point. Save money, take a look at these programs, and we appreciate y'all being here today. Thank y'all all very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. We will be sending a follow-up email with a recording of today's session so that you can share that with other members of your team, or you can rewatch it yourselves, because I know we covered a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. All right. Well, everyone stay safe out there. Thank you so much.
Bye.